All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, how goes it? How goes it?
It goes well. I am suffering with some allergies that I thought maybe I'd gotten away with it
Mm,
this season, but they have
mm-hmm.
apparently started to attack me this last week with a vengeance. So I apologize if I sound a little
Mm-hmm.
uh sniffly.
Sniffly, congestion, all the things. Yeah.
Hmm.
I get it. I suffer from it from time to time. And I don't know what the science is behind it, but Lisa, I hear that local honey helps.
Oh, I do
It's
have local honey. I have some every day, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take a spoonful of that.
All right. All right.
I give it to Kendrick and it certainly helps with his. I bought some like medicinal kind, did not work.
And that didn't
Local
do
from your
anything.
farmer's market and it works fantastic. So
Hmm.
but yeah. But let's get into the word of the week. I know that I've been leading us through the word of the week, but Lisa, you schooled me on this particular acronym, so guide us through here.
Yes. So, okay, a little backstory to this. So, I teach public policy to masters in social work students. And so I'm always advocating that they should be getting involved in their local and state politics, um, less politics and more if there's a policy that is being proposed at the state legislature or in their city that they feel that it's a good or a bad thing that they should go share that opinion with lawmakers. And so I was going to put my money where my mouth was because in my city there was an ordinance to allow accessory dwelling units in people's backyards. And there has been an organization that has emerged in my city that is what I would categorize as a NIMBY organization. So that is a not in my backyard. That's the acronym NIMBY. And so we have often, this is not new. This has been around for a little while now. And so you will hear people talk about NIMBYism in reference to community organizations, businesses, people who are in opposition to denser housing. So this is particularly true in suburban areas where folks do not want to move away from the single family home structure that is kind of prolific within suburban areas, right? And this NIMBYism is really prevalent in liberal circles as much as it is in conservative circles. So this is kind of an equal opportunity perspective across the ideological spectrum. And the argument being that if you add more housing, like triplexes, duplexes, these ADUs in people's backyards, it will reduce the value of my home. It will increase traffic, which may or may not be true. And it will make our communities less safe. Right. And so all of these stereotypes and such. So, anyway, so NIMBYism is what I wanted to share. And I think it's important because housing continues to be a problem. One of the biggest reasons why cities are struggling with homelessness is not just an issue of mental health or low income. It's also an issue of a lack of houses. Like, and the houses can't be built
That's
because
it. That's it.
folks such as those who fall into the NIMBY characterization are preventing this stuff from happening. So I couldn't make the session, but I sent in my written testimony in favor of ADUs. And so I
Mm-hmm.
would be put into the YIMBY, which is
Yimby.
yes in my backyard. So that's the kind of
Mm-hmm.
alternate movement that has kind of emerged in response to the NIMBY. And interestingly, in Colorado, there was a bill this session that failed, but it was called a YIGBY, YIGBY, yes in God's backyard, because it was a bill to enable churches and schools who have land that they're not using to build housing on that land. There was more to it than that, but that was essentially it. And so but it didn't pass. So that was interesting.
Interesting. Now,
Yeah.
see, that's very interesting because you're reminding me of there's a huge church in our area that has acres and acres and acres and acres of land, which is beautiful. Um, and on weekends, they rent out that acreage of land for the county to use for rec sports. So rec lacrosse, rec soccer, and that's a major line of income for them. And so, yeah, it would be interesting if that was a
Mm-hmm.
opportunity for housing that folks haven't thought about here because e- every time you tell somebody you live in Maryland, they automatically think the city. They think all of
Yeah.
Maryland is Baltimore. It's
And
actually
it's
very
not.
little of it. It's very
Yeah.
much countryside and suburbia and all that. And so there's a lot of land, but usually it's used for commercial use, if anything at all. So,
Yeah.
oh, that's interesting.
So that's interesting. I mean, one thing
Mm,
I didn't share, or I think it was implicit in what I said, but I want to make it explicit, is the reason why people are not in my backyard is really rooted in kind of racist and classist history, right? So you have homeowners who live in suburbia. You think about white flights, predominantly, not universally, but a majority, at least in my community, are white older homeowners, and they are resistant to an expansion of housing because of a belief that it will bring a more racially diverse group of people and a more socioeconomically diverse group of people, and they don't want that, right? So it's got its roots in redlining as well. And that looks different depending on the city you're in, depending on the state that you're in, but there it's all kind of historically located. But of course, folks now will say that's not what it's about, right? Because they're not,
hmm.
well, one, they don't want to be called classist or racist, and two,
Yes,
they're
yes.
not necessarily making that intellectual connection between that kind of that through line. um so
Hmm.
that's an important piece of NIMBYism, um that you'll
Yeah.
see across the country, although it will look different. But it
Hmm.
prevents people from building generational wealth, right? It prevents people from
Hmm.
getting a foot on the ladder or moving to a community that is desirable for them. So
Hmm. That's
anyway,
right. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Oh, well, that's a good one. Look, now you got me thinking I got to go do a little more reading on both and given that I
Mm-hmm.
have some connections with religious communities on that branch on this larger tree of NIMBYism.
Yep.
So that's pretty
Yep.
cool. Yeah.
Yep.
So got us into phase one.
All right. Phase one. So,
That
oh,
sigh told it all. That sigh
yeah.
was, yeah, it told it all for this phase.
So, I mean, so folks who have been paying attention may have noticed over the it's really over the last 10 years, I would say, but most explicitly in the last year since Trump kind of jumped back into the race and got re-elected, where there has been this what's the word I'm looking for? Like permeation, or no, that's not right. Like the boundaries of language and word choice have become more permissive. So I wanted to start here, but I don't think we need to stay here, Shaunna, is with the R word. So retarded is the word that I mean there, and I'm going to just say R word from here on out. And essentially, since Trump's election, but not exclusively since then, that use has become more prolific among not necessarily just right wing communities, but like thinking about Joe Rogan and other kind of mainstream center right communities, where there is this feeling that now that Trump is in power and we're back on the free speech train, asterisks, parentheses, free speech depends on who is saying what should be free. Um, that we can just say all these words despite the fact that they are harmful and hurtful. And one of the reasons why the R word kind of was no longer in popular usage was because of the harm that it had on the disabled community, right? So we have an article here that I'm going to link in the show notes, but I just wanted to read a little bit of it to you. So the term mental retardation was introduced in 1895, and it became the preferred term among psychologists and other community members because it replaced this diagnostic label such as imbecile, moron, or feeble-minded. And so the intention of bringing in that new term was as a neutral term, because at the time in the late 1800s, early 1900s, folks with disabilities were still generally disregarded or treated as lesser members of society. They were regularly institutionalized, and in some cases, they were forcibly sterilized. But because of these kind of prevailing cultural narratives around people with disabilities, that new term that had replaced imbecile itself became derogatory and a slur and an insult, because it continued to frame people with disability as lacking something, as being behind or backwards or not as capable. And so to using that term just reinforces that, right? So over time, it just dropped out of usage because of the understanding of the harm that it was having on communities. But it got, that word and others got pulled into this quote unquote wokeism, right? And therefore you're infringing upon my free speech, Shaunna, because you're not letting me say these words, and it's just a joke, or you're taking it too seriously, etc., etc., etc. We've heard them all before, right? And so now we're hearing the R word come back into popular usage, particularly center and to the right of center, as though it's this liberation, right? As though these folks who are now using it have been freed from the shackles of not using this and other terms because they're hurtful or harmful to people. And so I'm wondering what you think about that, because I've noticed this happening with this word and beyond, where terms that I feel should not be utilized, terms that are used to refer to women or gay people or people with disabilities, are being used more prolifically, as though it's now okay because Trump is understood as having given permission for people to exercise their free speech rights regardless of who it hurts.
Yeah, this is yet another example, y'all. I know this feels flagrant, but I'm okay with it. This is yet another example of where some of the pillars of American democracy as an American experiment, heavy underlining experiment, does not work. And what I mean by that is going back to your number one, your original statement of free speech depending on who's speaking. That's number one. But then the other piece too, which, you know, I keep going back to the pandemic on this because it's such a great example of a parallel theoretical concept, is that there is so much independence. Like it's almost like vitamins. Like, did you know that vitamins can actually harm you if you have too much? Like, if you have too much freedoms in certain areas, then it becomes harmful. And my concern with freedom of speech, my concern when we were in the pandemic for masking, is there is no, very rarely, collective altruism in this country. The collective. One of the things I think is really important, especially there's a number of world religions and traditions that talk about this in particular. Yes, it's permissible, but is it prudent, right? It's a statement that it's always revisited. Yes, I can call someone the R word, but is that wise, right? And so, you know, with that, we have a president in the White House that only listens to that first part. Is it permissible? I'm going to do what I want to do. I don't care who it runs over. I don't care who it hurts. I don't care who it bothers. I am going to do exactly what I want to do. And harming people is the furthest thing from my radar at any and all times. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
hurt does not exist in my world as a narcissist. Why? Because hurt is a choice that you make, Lisa, because I use this word against your group or groups. And I think that's where, he revisits opening Pandora's box on this every time he says things.
Mm-hmm.
Every time he says something that's flagrant against a particular group, it re-embold, I don't even know if that's a word, emboldens, re-emboldens people to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And when you don't have structure around that checks that imbalance, then that's a problem, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we talked about this on a previous episode. I won't go all the way into it, but we talked about this in a previous episode where my my sons were aware of the N word, but they were almost afraid to tell me about something that occurred at school with someone calling them the N word because they know it's not used here.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
permitted in this house, right? Well, we don't have that in this country where things aren't permitted, especially when you have a president that says, I don't care about uh, respect. I don't care about harm. I don't care about empathy. These words don't exist in my world, so I'm going to do what I want to do. And so the rest of the world, the rest of the country is just supposed to take it like a punching bag. And so, what's your option? And this is where I we're in the middle of World Pride. That's been part of the planning process for years. It's almost like the Olympics, Lisa. Like they tell you
Mm-hmm.
what city they're going to years in advance. And I applaud the LGBT communities in this country because they have taken words back and reclaimed them and redefined them in ways that I wonder how other identities plan to do that.
Right.
I know that the history of certain words, it won't be appropriate for some words and it might be appropriate for others. Like, for example, I don't think reclaiming is appropriate for the N word, but it may be appropriate for other identity groups that choose to reclaim their terms that describe them. I'm cool with whatever their community wants to do. But that's not what we're talking about here when we're talking about a flagrant president that's not
Yeah.
reclaiming words. He's using it for the very specific purpose of um, thinking that he's returning this country to a place that was great
Right.
when it may have
Yeah.
never been great for these communities.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's definitely true, at least pre 1990s and the ADA, right? But I think, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I honestly don't know whether Trump has used the R word or not. I think it's more, for me, this larger permission structure that has been created because of all the things you said around his lack of care or concern. And I want to just pull on that empathy thread
Mm-hmm.
because I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember if I sent this to you or not, or whether we, apologies if we have talked about this. Please correct me if we've done this before,
Mm-hmm.
but the empathy is actually becoming um, toxic within conservative, particularly evangelical Christian movements, that we have too much empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
to have empathy makes you weak, right? And
That's
so
right.
if
That's
we
right.
want to achieve our goals and we want to make America great again, recenter the evangelical church, like et cetera, empathy
Mm-hmm.
has no place. So it's a
That's right.
feminized concept. It's not something men should feel. It's problematic. It slows
Mm-hmm.
us down. It makes you weak, etc. And so
Mm-hmm.
I do think that that lack of empathy is on full display with the president and many of the people who are around him. Um,
Yes.
and so then that trickles out. And I just, I think I've mentioned Adam Silver from The Atlantic. He wrote that article years ago, 2017, I think he wrote it. The cruelty is the
Mm-hmm.
point, and he's since published a book in
Yes.
like 21, I think. And I just heard an interview with him, and he's like, I don't tend to say it, the cruelty is the point, because I don't want to become that guy with that catchphrase, right?
Mm.
But I think about it like, I don't know. This is where I like spiral, Shaunna, because I'm like, what? Like, the R word is harmful. You know that it has a negative connotation for people with disabilities. And now you're gleeful that you get to use it again. Yay, lucky you. But nowhere in that calculation is the harm that it might have. I mean, I'm thinking about Joe Rogan, right? He has millions of people that listen to his podcast. Are you trying to tell me that none of those have disabilities? Like, even from like a business standpoint, like,
Right. There you
why
go.
would you
Yeah.
choose to use a word that could potentially alienate people who listen to you? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so it's that lack of empathy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
yeah. And
Yep.
so I
Yep.
think that that is an important piece. And I just
Mm-hmm.
pretty much was blown away by this piece that I
Mm-hmm.
listened to that talked about how empathy is being demonized now as a
Yeah.
skill or as a kind of central and vital part of human nature, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Shocking. Yeah.
Well, and let's be clear, I any chance that I have to tell the ugly truth about y'all's president, I'm gonna do it. He did actually use the R word pretty recently, last October, when he was speaking about our Vice President, Kamala Harris.
Oh, you're right.
You remember that when he was
Yes.
ranting to these donors, these
Yep.
Republican
Yep.
donors, and he called her the R word. He said something about what was it? Called her mentally impaired. That's what he called her, mentally impaired, and also used the R word.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to use this language with anyone, but especially the highest ranking woman in this country, no, I'm not expecting any empathy at all. Um, and the demonization of empathy, again, it is a power flex because it's the easiest thing to attack. It's the
Yeah.
easiest thing to attack. Um, and so, at some point, unfortunately, it pushes very kind people to respond in kind to the lack of empathy to get to the longer term empathy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. Like I'm thinking about, for example, I'm thinking very much about Zelensky, for example, who unfortunately has been put in a very horrific situation,
Yeah.
but oftentimes has to find himself reverting to sometimes even stern behavior that he would not want to have for the sake of getting to the eventual empathy, because that's what he's wanted all along.
Mm.
His entire country was over there minding their own business.
Yeah.
And then when they're attacked, and then he says, hey, we need help, and you attack him again.
Yeah.
I'm again, when are we going to talk about the failure of the American experiment? And I'm not saying that we can't work in the future. I'm just saying that it is the nature of experimentation to fail multiple times over, to have this process of elimination to
Mm-hmm.
get to what works. We are failing in this area when it comes to quote unquote freedom of speech. And part of it is because we have a leader who models failure daily, purposeful failing daily.
Yeah. Yeah. And, yeah, Shaunna, you get to say that because I agree with you, but Lisa, you don't get to say that because I disagree with you, right? And by the way, Lisa,
Yeah,
I'm
that's right.
also gonna sue
That's
you
right.
for $2 billion because you said a thing I didn't like. So the whole, yeah,
There
I
you
don't,
go.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's another podcast discussion about how freedom of speech is being co-opted, manipulated. It doesn't really mean what we think it means, and the way that's been politicized and become so very partisan. And I'm like, if you are truly a free speech purist, it is all speech, whether or not you like it,
Bingo.
right?
Bingo. Exactly.
Um, there was,
Exactly.
yeah. So yeah. Anyway, I think that is about I guess I
Mm-hmm.
will end with listeners, just pay attention because there are other words that you might have thought were not acceptable, you
Mm-hmm.
know, not banned, but like people just don't say those things and they're coming back. And I think we just need to be alert because we need to remind people why they were retired in the first place, right?
Absolutely. Why they were retired in the first place. And if I could just tag on a little tail to your statement,
Yes.
remember why they were removed or neglected in American language to begin with, and take the lead from the very community that it was meant to
Yeah.
denigrate or describe. Take the
Yeah.
lead from them. If I'm
Yeah.
around a particular group and they don't use certain language, then neither will I.
Right.
Right. So let them take the lead. They are the experts of their experience. Period. Period. All right. Well, let's
Mm-hmm.
get into phase two. All right. So, Lisa, you know that I am not usually the how can I say, the mindless optimist that just looks for every silver lining in everything, because sometimes it's just not there. But this is a good one that
Correct.
I've been wanting to talk
Okay.
about for a while now. Okay, this is a good one. Especially because most folks know I have a very athletic younger son that tells me all the news all the time about anything athletic. And so he sent me a very cool link about Kalen Bink Sanders. He's a defensive tackle with the New Orleans Saints. And he and his brother Cameron are going to go into his already existing football camp that's been 3 years in the making. This particular year, they are going to brand the football camp as LGBT friendly. I love that they're partnering on this as brothers. Both of them are phenomenal at what they do in their own right, because Cameron, the brother, he's worked in stage, film, and he's also most known for being a dancer on the Eras tour with Taylor Swift. And
Oh,
so,
interesting.
yeah, and so both of them can kind of, bring their own attention and swag to the football camp, which I think is pretty cool. But Caitlin kind of announced this slowly but surely, especially during the most recent Super Bowl weekend, where he took part of the NFL Pride Clinic that they've been having. And so he said, quote, that's my goal. It's just to, continue to spread positive energy around that, because football is for everybody. Football is for all. I think we're getting closer to that in general as a society, but I'm just trying to do my part to forward that. And then he goes on to say later on, these are people who feel like they have to be hidden. Although they might love the sport, they might love the NFL, they might love football in general as a sport, but they kind of shy away from it because of orientations or all these other kinds of outside things. And so, yes, they've been pretty public about this. And even at the 36th annual GLAAD Media Awards, they announced how they were going to rebrand the football camp in such a way that people feel included. And so I think it's wonderful that they're doing that. We are still in Pride Month. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was lifted to everyone's radar so that you can stay aware of that. And if you have a loved one who loves football and they also may be part of the LGBTQ plus communities, to direct them in that way if possible. And I appreciate, as much as you and I both know, Lisa, that the NFL has flaw on top of flaw on top of flaw on top of flaw. I appreciate that the players are individually doing their part. And so the other piece to this is that for those of us that can get to the Smithsonian, or at least try to, Carl Nassib's number 94 Las Vegas Raiders jersey is now on display there at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, where they're honoring Nassib as the first openly gay player to appear in an NFL game. And so they're taking the jersey from his 2021 season opener against the Ravens, and they built an entire display about this, which is very cool because Carl loves history. Obviously, he loves football, and it was just kind of these two things coming together for him. And so these are things I wanted to lift up as the very rare silver linings in American culture right now. Very
Mm-hmm.
rare. I want to put a super very rare on that, and how I appreciate both of them trying to, how can I say, they're trying to be one drop of positivity in
Mm-hmm.
a pretty large cesspool of foolishness right now, Lisa. So I want to give them
Yeah.
their props while we can. But I'm wondering what you think about both of those, because I know that you and I both have very strong feelings about the NFL. However, we
Mm-hmm.
also strive to be allies at the same time. So this is one of those messy moments that we have on this podcast regularly, right?
Yeah. I mean, what's popping into mind is, at the very same time this is happening, this is a couple of weeks old now, Pete Hegseth, the completely unqualified Secretary of Defense, renamed or requested that one of the many ships he wants to rename. But Harvey Milk, who was a elected council member in San Francisco in the 60s, openly gay, who was ultimately murdered, along with the mayor of San Francisco at the time. And so and he was in the Navy. He was in the Navy. And so one of the ships was named after him. And right on the first day of Pride Month, Hegseth wanted to, or instructed that name should come off of the ship and it should be renamed. So, I mean, and talk about the cruelty is the point, right? But
that's right.
So this is a really nice offset to that, and the ways in which the LGBTQIA community has been targeted in this current administration. To hear this, what's interesting to me with this is I think a lot of people might say, why do you need to brand a football camp as LGBT friendly, right? Because football is for everyone. So it doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is, or your gender, or your age, or your racial identity, right? You can just come. And it's that erroneous assumption, primarily made by people of privilege, that if you don't say anything about all of these different identity groups who have been excluded from, ABCD over time, then it is just an event or a camp or a whatever is just de facto neutrally at baseline inclusive, which it isn't, right? And we know that the NFL, we know that football has a long history of homophobia. And so I think that the active engagement and the active way in which these brothers are saying, no, we are going to specifically brand this camp as inclusive and friendly for the LGBT community, so that folks who are gay or lesbian or trans or queer know that they can come and participate in this camp and be valued and be loved and be supported, right? And that is not there just with any old camp, right? And I think we're in this environment where the assumption is baseline is inclusive, and if we do anything on top of baseline, then we are creating special treatment for those groups, rather than baseline is not inclusive because we have a long history of exclusion, particularly of the LGBT community in sport. And so we need to do something to proactively create an environment that is welcoming. So it's juxtaposed against this climate of anything DEI related is illegal, right? Or is unfair discrimination. So I'm waiting, Shaunna, for the critique of this camp to be, you are now discriminating against heterosexual people.
Oh, of course. And what I appreciate is that I know nothing is untouchable, but if it is private money for Kaylin and Cameron to do whatever the hell they want to do with it, then yeah, everybody has their critique of certain things, but what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Nothing, And so, I think what's powerful about it is they recognize that the baseline has not been good for these particular groups. When you're talking about a very stereotypical, like even Carl Nassib in his interview on The Pivot, he specifically talks about how he knows that it's counterintuitive for straight people to see a 6'5", 200+ guy that'll run through a wall for you. That's counterintuitive to stereotypes of the LGBT community. And that was part of the reason why he did come out. And I also feel, I know he didn't say this, but there were countless members of the LGBT community that chose to come out after they left the league. not while
Yeah.
they were in it.
Mhm.
So the fact that it was what, 2021, and he's the first active player to come out should tell you the
Yeah.
history of the league has not been welcoming, period. And so, given that, I think, we can't take for granted that everyone feels comfortable. We can't take for granted because Carl Nassib also talked about, the kids and other young people that thank him for being an out active player, because similar to the fool in the White House giving permission to people to use language that's harmful, Carl
Mhm.
Nassib also gave closeted, and I know we just talked about this in a previous podcast,
Yep.
forgive me, I'm still working on language, forgive me, y'all. Um, those that are not out permission to be out if they so choose in what has historically been seen as a somewhat hostile environment. That's what I'm trying to say. So giving permission to, opening doors for, because that's what hits me about both of these situations is that, are you opening the door for good behavior or for bad behavior?
Right.
I think I know that we have a president that constantly keeps doors wide open, knocks down doors and walls for people to act a fool. But with this situation, I love that Carl and Cameron and, I feel like, okay, thank you for some bold people like Kaylin, Cameron, Carl, that all say, look, this is very real. I love those memes that remind people, especially during Pride Month, that whatever's going on at school or at camp or wherever is not trying to turn your kid gay. It's trying to make sure that we save the lives of young people and we
Yeah.
improve their quality of life. Because in case you didn't know the numbers are very real. Those kids overwhelmingly have suicidal ideation. They have other mental health challenges, and they're thirsty for support. And so something like this, yeah, we know. I mean, Lisa, we have been in the DEI game long enough that it is never on top of never that we go without someone's critique. The fortunate thing about Kaylin and Cameron's uh, camp is that, yeah, they can critique all they want to, but who cares? No one can pull the funding from them because that's their money. Nobody can say you can't do it. They have more freedom, which comes through the affluence of being a professional athlete and a professional dancer too.
Yeah, and I'm like such like a Debbie Downer right now because I'm thinking about Carl Nassib's exhibition at the Smithsonian National
Oh
Museum of American
yeah.
History, and I would just think as you were talking, I was just like, oh dear, why do I feel like there's probably a target on that particular exhibit's back, right? Like, I mean,
Oh, of course. Of course.
just the
Of course.
erasure. I mean, so this just elevates what the brothers are doing
Mm-hmm.
to an even greater degree within this culture where we know um, Black history, LGBT history, women's history is being erased as not accurate or not representative of American history. So I think there needs to be more private actors who have the platform and the financial capacity to do more things like this, right? So as these holes get
Mm-hmm.
created, as this current administration kind of washes away, rips away, burns down these strides that we've
Mm-hmm.
made to create visibility for people and groups who have been omitted from history, is that those
There you go.
gaps then get filled,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully only needing to be filled temporarily by people who have the platform and the money. So I also see what they're doing as that too, as I think about it in relation to the ways in which other um historical
Mm.
wrongs are being
Mm-hmm.
minimized and erased.
Yeah, yeah. But well, and this feeds into what I have consistently said over time, Lisa, is this is the reason why more more LGBT folks, more people of color, more women need more resources and more
Yeah.
affluence so you
Yeah.
can do whatever the hell you want to do.
Yeah.
Lisa, if you and I were affluent and we wanted to open up a museum of folks with one brown eye and one blue eye, we could do it because
Yeah.
nobody can tell us that we can't do it because we have the resources that go undisputed from anyone else. Until we get to a place where we do either cultivate those resources or however we acquire them, we won't have these type of freedoms because we'll
Yeah.
always be hinging upon what does whatever government say that we can and cannot do. And I just don't want to be hinged upon that. I just
Well,
don't.
coming back, yeah, to free speech, right? But you're actually just making me think of this legal analysis I was just listening to that
Uh-huh.
says the average American, or not even maybe the average American, many Americans, and indeed maybe many people broadly, they
Mm-hmm.
assume power is the same as the rule of law, meaning
Mm.
someone who is in power, like a president or a prime minister or some other leader, um, if they do something, it
Mm-hmm.
it must be legal or is the law, right? So when you're saying that, we could open a brown eye, blue eye museum, whatever, private money, no one could come after us. Well, the government could come after us and try and shut us down, right? And then this kind of prevailing assumption, well, if the government is coming after Shaunna and Lisa for this museum, it must be legal because the government has power, right? And actually, that is
Mm.
something that we should decouple, because having power
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean that the behavior you exhibit is necessarily in alignment with the rule of law, right? And
Ah,
that
absolutely. I gotcha.
we
Mm-hmm.
passively just accept that. So I hope.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It was just making me think about that, because I don't. I'm not convinced that these two brothers are not going to get um attacked in one way or another, and then an assumed, well,
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing is wrong when what they're doing is none of your damn business, right?
That's it. I think let's take that to another quick place and then we'll wrap up. It is similar to the renaming of the Harvey Milk. I'm like, why is it that, like, think about the energy, Lisa. Think about the amount
Yes.
of energy it
Yes.
takes for people to go out of their way to remove something, get rid of something, silence
Yeah.
someone, erase a whole group. Like it's not like you and I are going down the street and we need to move something out of the way to continue forward. It is I am taking a full-fledged detour and
Yep.
my purpose is to stay on detours to denigrate, to remove, to get rid of, to make sure that no one knows about these particular individuals and groups. That is a lot of energy
It is.
to espouse to make sure and that to me is such that's beyond bothersome, like that's deep-seated targeted hatred that
Yeah.
it just takes so much energy and I'm thinking to myself, even if I didn't like XYZ, then why am I going out of the way? Like it remind like think of all the simple ways this shows up in our life. Like Lisa, if you and I don't like chocolate cupcakes, but 100 miles out of our way, there's a chocolate cupcake bakery, and we're gonna go out of our way to go burn that shit down to the ground. But it's in no way, shape, or form bothering us. It's not on our route. We just don't like chocolate cupcakes. And we don't want nobody else to have chocolate cupcakes because we don't like them. That takes a lot of energy that I just
Yeah.
don't want to espouse. There are lots of things in this world that I don't care for either, but it's not bothering me. And I'm sure as hell not going to go out of my way to bother them. That to me is so much energy that I don't feel that, especially when it comes to an administration, but just in general, we don't have a 47 uh, administrative agenda. We have an
Right.
anti-agenda. It's not a direction, it's a detour to make sure that no one else
Yeah.
can move along their direction. And that becomes
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Ugh. Okay, I just took our upper to a downer. My bad, y'all. Support the camp. Support call and
Yes.
deceive,
Support the
okay?
camp. Yeah. Support, support, support.
Support, support, support. I know, I know. All right, Lisa. Well, look, we are right on the edge here now. We are at episode 197, y'all. So keep hanging in there with us as we continue our campaign to 200. If you want to reach us, you can find us on all social media and all of your favorite podcast apps at Unfazed Unedited with the brackets around the first un. You can email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com or visit our website and you can find everything there, unfazedpodcast.com. You can find the old and the new shows as we approach that 200 mark. So if you like this week's episode, like, subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends, coworkers, or anyone in this phase of your life. So, Dr. Lisa, until next time.
All right, till next time.